The convent bells had just finished tolling for evening prayer when Willa Fairchild slipped through the kitchen door and ran into the Oklahoma darkness, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst right through her borrowed dress. She had planned this escape for 3 months, ever since Sister Margaret told her that she would take her final vows in the spring, binding her forever to a life she had never chosen for herself. Her parents had died of fever when she was 12, and the sisters had taken her in out of charity. But somewhere along the way, charity had turned into expectation, and expectation into obligation. Now, at 19 years old, with her whole life stretching before her like an unwritten page, Willa refused to let someone else hold the pen. The September air was cool against her flushed cheeks as she ran down the dirt road leading away from the convent, clutching a small bundle of possessions she had hidden in the woodshed that afternoon. She had no plan beyond getting as far from those gray stone walls as possible. The moon hung fat and yellow over the prairie, casting enough light for her to see the rutted path ahead, and she followed it blindly, her breath coming in gasps, her legs burning with effort. She had been taught that running was unladylike, that a proper woman moved with grace and deliberation, but right now she felt wild and free, and she never wanted to stop. She did not know how long she had been running when she heard the sound of hoofbeats behind her. Terror seized her chest as she glanced back and saw a single rider approaching fast. For a terrible moment, she thought the sisters had discovered her absence already and sent someone after her. But then she realized that convents did not employ horsemen, and whoever was coming might be far more dangerous than angry nuns. She tried to run faster, but her legs were already trembling with exhaustion, and the rider closed the distance easily. "Hold up there," a male voice called out, not unkindly. "You are going to hurt yourself running blind in the dark like that." Willa stopped and spun around, her chest heaving, ready to fight or flee again if necessary. The rider pulled his horse to a stop a few yards away and dismounted slowly, as if trying not to spook a nervous animal. He was tall and lean, wearing dusty range clothes and a weathered hat pushed back on his head. Even in the moonlight she could see that he was young, probably not much older than she was, with dark hair and a face that seemed designed for easy smiles. "I am not going back," she said fiercely before he could speak. "Whatever they are paying you, I do not care. I am not going back." The cowboy held up both hands in a gesture of peace. "Madam, I do not know where you are running from or why, and it is none of my business unless you want it to be. I am just riding home from town and saw someone running down the road like the devil himself was giving chase. Wanted to make sure you were all right." Willa studied him warily, trying to determine if he was telling the truth. She had been taught that men were dangerous, that they wanted only one thing from women, and that a lady alone with a man was inviting disaster. But she had also been taught that her own desires did not matter, that obedience was the highest virtue, and she was in the process of rejecting those lessons entirely. She made a decision based on instinct rather than instruction. "I ran away from the convent," she admitted, lifting her chin defiantly. "I am not a nun and I never wanted to be one. They took me in when my parents died and now they think they own my future. But they do not. It belongs to me." The cowboy looked at her for a long moment, and then his face split into a smile that transformed him entirely. It was not a mocking smile or a predatory one, but something warm and genuine that made her tense shoulders relax slightly. "Good for you," he said simply. "Takes courage to choose your own path. Where are you headed?" "I do not know," Willa confessed. "I just knew I had to leave. I have a little money saved, enough for a few days of food and lodging. I thought I would find work somewhere, maybe as a seamstress or a teacher. I can read and write and do figures. The sisters made sure of that much. "Well, you are not going to get far on foot in the dark," the cowboy said practically. "The nearest town with a hotel is 10 miles up this road, and there are coyotes and worse between here and there. My family has a ranch about 3 miles south. My mother runs a boarding house there for travelers and ranch hands. She is always looking for help and she pays fair. If you want honest work and a safe place to sleep tonight, I can take you there." Willa hesitated. Everything she had been taught told her this was foolish, that accepting help from a strange man would lead to ruin. But another part of her, the part that had found the courage to run, whispered that she had to trust someone sometime, and this young cowboy with the kind smile seemed as good a bet as any. "Then run toward me instead," he said softly, as if reading her thoughts. "I am offering help, nothing more. You can ride behind me on my horse, and if my mother does not have work for you, I will take you to town tomorrow myself and help you find something else. I give you my word as a gentleman, though I know that might not mean much from a dusty cowboy you just met." Something in his voice, in the way he stood there patiently waiting for her decision without pushing or demanding, made up her mind. Willa took a step forward, and then another, until she was standing close enough to see that his eyes were a deep brown, almost black in the moonlight. "What is your name?" she asked. "Nathan Dalton," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "My friends call me Nate." "Willa Fairchild," she replied. "And I accept your offer, Mr. Dalton, though I hope I am not making a terrible mistake." "You are not," he assured her. "I promise you that." He helped her mount his horse, a patient bay gelding named Copper, and then swung up behind her. Willa had never been this close to a man before, and she was acutely aware of his chest against her back, his arms reaching around her to hold the reins. But his touch was respectful, his manner easy, and after a few minutes she found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse's gait. "How long were you at the convent?" Nathan asked as they rode through the prairie darkness. 7 years, Willa said. "Since I was 12. My parents owned a small farm near here, but when the fever took them, there was no one else. My father had a brother out in California, but we never heard from him after my father died. The sisters took me in and I was grateful, truly. They fed me and clothed me and educated me. But they also decided my future without asking what I wanted, and when I tried to tell them I did not have a vocation, they said I was too young to know my own heart." "And now?" Nathan asked. "Now I know that I want to see the world beyond those walls," Willa said with sudden passion. "I want to choose my own path, make my own mistakes, live my own life." "Is that so wrong?" "Not even a little bit," Nathan said. "Everyone should get to choose their own path. My father wanted me to go east to college, become a lawyer or a banker. But I love this land, love working with horses and cattle, and I could not imagine spending my life behind a desk in some city." He was disappointed, but he came to accept it eventually. "I hope the sisters will do the same for you." "I do not think they will," Willa said quietly. "They will say I am selfish and ungrateful. They will say I am throwing away my soul's salvation for worldly pleasures." "Well, from where I am sitting, your soul looks just fine," Nathan said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "And there is nothing worldly about wanting to make your own choices. That is just being human." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Willa found herself relaxing further, the terror of her escape fading into something more like exhilaration. She had done it. She had actually run away, and now she was riding through the night with a cowboy she had just met, heading toward an unknown future. It should have terrified her, but instead she felt more alive than she had in years. The Dalton Ranch appeared as a cluster of lights in the distance, gradually resolving into a large main house, a barn, a bunkhouse, and several smaller outbuildings. As they rode into the yard, dogs began barking and a woman emerged from the main house, wiping her hands on her apron. "Nathan Dalton, is that you?" she called. "You are late for supper and I was about to send your brothers out looking for you." "Sorry, Ma," Nathan called back, dismounting and then helping Willa down. "I found someone who needs our help." The woman, who Willa assumed was Nathan's mother, came closer and studied Willa with sharp, but not unkind eyes. She was a handsome woman in her late 40s, with threads of silver in her dark hair and the capable look of someone who had raised a family and run a household on the frontier. "Found her running down the road from town," Nathan continued. "She is looking for honest work and I thought you might have something for her at the boarding house." "Did you now?" Mrs. Dalton said dryly, but her eyes were twinkling. "And what is your name, girl?" "Willa Fairchild, madam," Willa said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I can sew and cook and clean, I can read and write and do accounts. I will work hard for fair wages and a place to sleep." "Where are you from?" Mrs. Dalton asked. Willa took a deep breath. "The convent, madam. The one about 13 miles north of here. I ran away tonight because I do not want to be a nun." She waited for judgment or condemnation, but Mrs. Dalton only nodded thoughtfully. "The Sisters of Mercy, I know them. They do good work, but they can be a bit rigid in their thinking." "Did they mistreat you?" "No, madam," Willa said honestly. "They were never cruel. But they decided my future without my consent, and I could not bear the thought of spending the rest of my life behind those walls when I never chose that path for myself." "Fair enough," Mrs. Dalton said. "I admire a woman who knows her own mind. As it happens, I do need help. I run a boarding house for travelers and some of the ranch hands, and my current girl just left to get married. Room and board plus $2 a week and Sundays off. The work is hard but honest. If you want it, it is yours." Relief flooded through Willa so powerfully that her knees went weak. "Yes, madam, thank you. I will not disappoint you." "See that you do not," Mrs. Dalton said, but her tone was warm. "Come inside and I will get you settled. Nathan, take care of your horse and then come eat. Your supper is getting cold." "Yes, madam," Nathan said, grinning at Willa. "Welcome to the Dalton Ranch, Miss Fairchild. I think you are going to like it here," as Willa followed Mrs. Dalton into the warm, lamp-lit house. She glanced back and saw Nathan watching her with that easy smile, and something fluttered in her chest that had nothing to do with fear or exhaustion. She pushed the feeling aside and focused on the immediate present, but some part of her knew that her life had just changed in ways she could not yet begin to imagine. Mrs. Dalton showed her to a small but clean room at the back of the house, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the prairie. It was simply furnished but comfortable, and to Willa, who had spent 7 years sleeping in a dormitory with 20 other girls, it felt like a palace. "You will take your meals with the family," Mrs. Dalton explained. "Breakfast is at 5:30 because the men start work early. You will help me prepare it and then clean up after. During the day, you will help with the boarding house tasks, washing linens, preparing rooms, cooking for the guests. We usually have 4 to 6 boarders at any given time, ranch hands mostly, though sometimes we get travelers passing through. Supper is at 6, and after cleanup, your time is your own. Does that sound acceptable?" "More than acceptable, madam," Willa said. "Thank you for taking a chance on me." "We all deserve a chance to make our own way," Mrs. Dalton said. "Now you must be hungry. Come down to the kitchen, and I will get you something to eat." The kitchen was large and warm, with a massive stove, a long wooden table, and the lingering smell of roasted meat and fresh bread. Nathan was already there, along with 2 younger boys who looked to be his brothers, and an older man who had Nathan's eyes and the weathered look of someone who had spent his life working outdoors. "This is my husband, James," Mrs. Dalton said. "And these are my other sons, Samuel and Thomas. Boys, this is Willa Fairchild. She's going to be helping me with the boarding house." "Pleased to meet you," Willa said shyly. James Dalton nodded at her with gruff politeness, and the younger boys stared with unabashed curiosity. Samuel looked to be about 15, Thomas perhaps 12. Nathan just smiled at her from across the table, and she found herself smiling back. Mrs. Dalton put a plate of food in front of her, more food than Willa had seen in a single meal in years. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, fresh bread with butter. She ate slowly, trying not to seem too eager, but she was ravenous and it was delicious. "Nathan says you ran away from the convent," Samuel said bluntly, earning a sharp look from his mother. "Is that true?" "Samuel, mind your manners," Mrs. Dalton said. "It is all right," Willa said. "Yes, it is true. I was there for 7 years since my parents died, but I did not want to become a nun. I wanted to choose my own life." "That makes sense," Thomas said thoughtfully. "I would not want to be a nun either, or a priest. They have to get up too early and pray all the time." "Thomas," James Dalton said warningly, but there was a hint of amusement in his voice. "It is not just the praying," Willa said. "It is the obedience. Promising to obey without question, to never have opinions or desires of your own. The sisters are good women and they do important work, but I knew in my heart it was not the life for me." "Then you did the right thing by leaving," Nathan said firmly. "Everyone should get to choose their own path." The conversation moved on to ranch business, the upcoming cattle drive, the state of the pastures, the need to repair the barn roof before winter. Willa listened quietly, soaking in the warmth and normalcy of a family meal, something she had not experienced since her parents died. The Daltons talked over each other, teased and laughed, debated and discussed, and their easy affection for one another made her chest ache with longing. After supper, Nathan walked her back to her room, carrying a lamp to light the way through the darkened house. "Thank you," Willa said when they reached her door, "for stopping tonight, for bringing me here, for everything. I do not know what I would have done if you had not come along." "You would have figured something out," Nathan said confidently. "You strike me as someone who lands on her feet. But I am glad I was there to help, and I am glad you are staying. I think you are going to fit in well here." "I hope so," Willa said. "Your family seems wonderful." "They are," Nathan agreed. "Ma can be tough, but she is fair and she has a good heart. Pa is quieter, but he is solid as a rock. And my brothers are pests, but I am fond of them anyway." He paused, seeming to search for words. "I know you have been through a lot and you are probably tired and overwhelmed, but if you ever need anything or just want to talk, you can come find me." All right, Willa said softly. "Thank you, Nathan." "Good night, Willa," he said, and the way he said her name, gentle and warm, made that fluttering sensation return to her chest. "Good night," she whispered, and watched him walk away down the hallway, the lamplight casting his shadow long and tall against the walls. Alone in her room, Willa lay down on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind whirling with everything that had happened. This morning she had woken up in the convent, resigned to a future she did not want. Now she was lying in a ranch house in Oklahoma, with a job and a room of her own and the prospect of a real life ahead of her. And there was a cowboy with kind eyes and an easy smile who made her feel things she did not quite understand but wanted to explore. For the first time in 7 years, Willa fell asleep smiling. She woke before dawn to the sound of roosters crowing and boots stomping in the hallway. For a moment she was disoriented, expecting to see the familiar gray walls of the dormitory, but then memory rushed back and she sat up quickly, her heart pounding with excitement rather than fear. This was her first day of her new life, and she was determined to prove herself worthy of the Daltons' trust. She dressed quickly in one of the 2 simple dresses she owned, twisted her long brown hair into a bun, and made her way to the kitchen. Mrs. Dalton was already there, stirring a pot of oatmeal on the stove and frying bacon in a large cast-iron skillet. "Good morning," Willa said. "What can I do to help?" Mrs. Dalton looked pleased. "You can start by setting the table. Plates and utensils are in that cupboard there. We will need settings for 8. The 4 family members, you, and 3 ranch hands who take their meals with us." Willa set to work, moving quickly and efficiently. She had spent years helping in the convent kitchen, and the rhythm of meal preparation was familiar and comforting. By the time the men started filing in, the table was set, the food was ready, and Willa had already brewed a large pot of strong coffee. Nathan was the last to arrive, his hair damp from washing and his smile bright when he saw her. "Good morning, Miss Fairchild. I hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you," Willa said, feeling suddenly shy under his gaze. Breakfast was a boisterous affair, with the men talking about the day's work ahead and Mrs. Dalton efficiently serving food and keeping everyone's cups filled. Willa helped where she could, learning names and faces, trying to remember who took sugar in their coffee and who preferred their eggs cooked which way. After the men left for their morning chores, Willa helped Mrs. Dalton clean up and then spent the morning learning her new duties. She stripped beds and washed linens, swept floors and beat rugs, polished furniture and cleaned windows. The work was hard and physical, but it felt good to be useful, to be working for her own keep rather than living on charity. At midday, Mrs. Dalton declared a break for lunch, and they sat together in the kitchen with bread and cheese and cold chicken. "You are a hard worker," Mrs. Dalton observed, "and you do not complain. I appreciate that." "I am grateful for the opportunity," Willa said honestly. "I know I have no references or experience, and you are taking a risk by hiring me." "Everyone starts somewhere," Mrs. Dalton said, "and I am a good judge of character. I can see you are honest and willing to work hard. That is all I need." She paused, studying Willa thoughtfully. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course," Willa said. "You think the sisters will come looking for you?" Willa had been wondering the same thing. "I do not know. Probably. They will feel responsible for me and they will worry about my soul. But I am 19 years old, legally an adult. They cannot force me to go back." "No, but they can make things difficult," Mrs. Dalton said. "If they do come here, I will support whatever decision you make. If you want to go back, I will not stop you. If you want to stay, I will tell them you are under my protection. But you need to be sure this is what you want, because once you make this choice, there is no going back without consequences." "I am sure," Willa said firmly. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." "Good," Mrs. Dalton said. "Then we will face whatever comes together." As the days passed, Willa settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She rose before dawn to help prepare breakfast, worked through the day cleaning and cooking and tending to the needs of the boarding house, and fell into bed each night exhausted but satisfied. The work was harder than anything she had done at the convent, but it was also more rewarding because she was working for herself, building a life on her own terms. She also found herself looking forward to the moments when she saw Nathan. He was often busy with ranch work, riding out early and returning late, but he always made time to talk to her when their paths crossed. Sometimes it was just a friendly greeting as he passed through the kitchen, sometimes a longer conversation in the evening after supper. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his love for horses and the open prairie, about his dreams of someday running the ranch himself when his father was ready to retire. She told him about her life before the convent, about her parents and the small farm she barely remembered, about the books she had read, and the places she dreamed of seeing. They were easy together in a way that surprised her. She had expected men to be crude or frightening or demanding, based on the vague warnings the sisters had given about the world outside the convent. But Nathan was none of those things. He was kind and respectful, funny and thoughtful, and when he looked at her with those dark eyes, she felt something stirring inside her that she did not quite have words for. 3 weeks after her arrival, on a Sunday afternoon when she had the day off, Nathan found her sitting on the porch with a book from the Daltons' small library. "What are you reading?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Jane Eyre," Willa said, holding up the worn volume. "Have you read it?" "No, but my mother loves it," Nathan said. "She reads it every few years and cries every time. It is quite romantic," Willa admitted, "though also rather dark in places. Do you like romantic stories?" Nathan asked, and there was something in his tone that made her pulse quicken. "I do," she said carefully. "Though I do not have much experience with romance myself, the sisters taught us that romantic love was a distraction from our devotion to God." "And what do you think?" Nathan asked. Willa considered the question seriously. "I think that love, in all its forms, is a gift. I think closing yourself off from it in the name of devotion is like refusing to see beauty because you are afraid of being distracted. I think God, if He is truly loving, would want us to experience love, not hide from it." Nathan was quiet for a moment, and when she looked at him, his expression was intense in a way that made her breath catch. "I think you are right," he said softly. "And I think you are very brave for following your own heart instead of letting someone else tell you what to feel." "I am not brave," Willa protested. "I am terrified most of the time. Terrified that I made the wrong choice, that I will fail, that I do not know how to live in the world." "Being brave does not mean not being scared," Nathan said. "It means being scared and doing it anyway. And you are doing it, Willa. You are building a whole new life from nothing. That takes more courage than most people ever show." "You make it sound much more impressive than it is," Willa said, but she was pleased. "I am just telling the truth," Nathan said. He hesitated, then continued, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "You ever regret leaving? You ever wish you had stayed?" "No," Willa said without hesitation. "Not even once. I miss some of the sisters, the ones who were kind to me. I miss the security of knowing exactly what each day would bring. But I do not miss the feeling of being trapped, of having no say in my own life. Here I am free. Even when the work is hard, even when I am tired and uncertain, I am still free, and that is worth everything." "I am glad," Nathan said simply. "I am glad you are here." The way he said it, the warmth in his voice and the softness in his eyes, made it clear he meant more than just being glad she was working for his family. Willa felt heat rising to her cheeks, but she did not look away. "I am glad too," she said quietly. They sat in comfortable silence after that, Willa pretending to read her book while being acutely aware of Nathan's presence beside her. She could not remember ever feeling this way before, this mix of nervousness and excitement, this sense of standing on the edge of something wonderful and terrifying at the same time. The peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats and wagon wheels. They both looked up to see a small carriage approaching the ranch, driven by a man in a dark suit. As it drew closer, Willa's stomach dropped. Sitting in the back of the carriage, severe and unmistakable in her black habit, was Sister Margaret, the Mother Superior of the convent. "Oh no," Willa breathed, her book falling forgotten into her lap. Nathan was on his feet instantly. "Is that them?" "Yes," Willa said, standing as well, her legs trembling. "That is Sister Margaret. She runs the convent. She has come for me." "You do not have to go with her," Nathan said firmly. "You are an adult. You have the right to make your own choices." "I know," Willa said, but her voice shook. But she is going to be very angry, and she will say terrible things, and part of me is still afraid of disappointing her. Then I will stay with you, Nathan said. You do not have to face her alone. Mrs. Dalton emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron and studying the approaching carriage with sharp eyes. Is that who I think it is? Yes, madam, Willa said. Sister Margaret from the convent. All right then, Mrs. Dalton said calmly. Stand your ground, girl. Remember why you left, and remember that you have friends here who will support you. The carriage pulled to a stop in front of the house, and Sister Margaret descended with the driver's assistance. She was a tall, thin woman in her 60s, with a face that seemed carved from stone and eyes that could freeze water. She looked at Willa with an expression of profound disappointment. Willa Fairchild, she said, her voice cold and formal. You have caused a great deal of trouble and worry. We expected you to come to your senses and return on your own, but since you have not, I have come to fetch you home. This is my home now, Willa said, trying to keep her voice steady. I am not going back to the convent, Sister Margaret. Do not be foolish, child, Sister Margaret said sharply. You have no money, no family, no prospects. You are living here on the charity of strangers, working as a common servant. Is this truly the life you want? You were meant for something higher, something better. You were meant to serve God. I can serve God here just as well as I could have served him there, Willa said. Better even because here I am choosing it freely, not because someone else decided for me. Free choice, Sister Margaret scoffed. You are 19 years old. You know nothing of the world, nothing of the dangers that await young women without protection. You will fall into sin and ruin, and then where will you be? She will be here, Mrs. Dalton said firmly, stepping forward. Under my protection and in my employ. Your concern is noted, sister, but Willa has made her choice and I support it. Sister Margaret turned her cold gaze on Mrs. Dalton. And you think you are doing her a kindness by supporting this foolish rebellion. She is throwing away her chance at salvation for the sake of worldly freedom. She will regret this decision for the rest of her life. That is for her to decide, Nathan said, his voice hard. Not you, not anyone else. She is a grown woman with the right to choose her own path. And who are you to speak of rights and choices? Sister Margaret demanded. A cowboy who found a pretty girl alone on the road and brought her home like a stray. We know your type. You filled her head with pretty words and promises, and now she thinks she is in love, when really she is just being manipulated. That is enough, Willa said, her voice suddenly strong. The fear that had been gripping her chest released all at once, replaced by anger. You do not get to tell me what I am feeling or why I made my choices. I left because I was unhappy, because I was living a life that was never meant for me. Nathan helped me, yes, but he did not manipulate me or seduce me or fill my head with lies. He offered me help when I needed it, and his family gave me work and a safe place to stay. That is all. And even if there were more to it, even if I were falling in love with him, that would still be my choice to make, not yours. She had not meant to say that last part, had not even fully acknowledged to herself that she was falling in love with Nathan, but now that the words were out, she realized they were true. She was falling in love with him, with his kindness and his smile and the way he made her feel like her own thoughts and feelings mattered. Sister Margaret's face had gone rigid with disapproval. So it is true then. You have thrown away your soul's salvation for the sake of a man you barely know. I am deeply disappointed in you, Willa. Your parents trusted us to care for you, to guide you toward a righteous life. What would they think if they could see you now? That struck a nerve, and Willa felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. My parents wanted me to be happy, she said quietly. They loved me, and they would want me to choose a life that brought me joy, not one that made me miserable in the name of virtue. I am sorry if you feel I have betrayed your trust, Sister Margaret, but I am not going back. This is my life now, and I am going to live it on my own terms." For a long moment, Sister Margaret simply stared at her, and Willa could see the struggle playing out behind those cold eyes. Finally, the older woman sighed and something that might have been sadness flickered across her face. "Very well," she said stiffly. "I can see that your mind is made up and I cannot force you to return. But know this, Willa Fairchild. If you ever find yourself in trouble, if you ever need help, the convent will be there for you. We may be disappointed in your choices, but we do not abandon our own. You will always have a place with us if you need it." It was more kindness than Willa had expected, and she felt some of her anger soften. "Thank you, Sister Margaret. I appreciate that, truly. And I am sorry for the worry I caused. I know you meant well, even if we did not agree on what was best for me." Sister Margaret inclined her head slightly, then turned and climbed back into the carriage. The driver clicked to the horses and they pulled away, leaving Willa standing on the porch with the Daltons, her heart still racing but her shoulders lighter than they had been in weeks. "Well," Mrs. Dalton said briskly, "that could have gone worse. Are you all right, dear?" "I am," Willa said, surprised to find it was true. "I was terrified at first, but then I just got angry. She had no right to come here and tell me I was making a mistake, that I was throwing my life away. She does not know me, not really. She never bothered to ask what I wanted or what would make me happy." "No," Mrs. Dalton agreed. "She was too busy deciding what you should want. Well, she is gone now, and you can stop worrying about whether they will come for you. You have made your choice and stood by it. I am proud of you." "So am I," Nathan said softly, and when Willa looked at him, his eyes were warm with admiration. "Thank you," Willa said to both of them, "for supporting me, for standing with me. I could not have done that without you." "Of course you could have," Nathan said, "but I am glad you did not have to." That evening, after supper had been cleared and the house had settled into quiet, Nathan found Willa on the porch again, watching the sun set over the prairie in streaks of orange and pink and gold. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Not at all," Willa said, making room for him on the step. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the light fade and the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Finally, Nathan spoke. "Did you mean what you said earlier?" he asked quietly. "About falling in love." Willa's heart began to pound, but she forced herself to be honest. "Yes. I should not have said it like that, not in front of everyone, but yes, I meant it." "Good," Nathan said, and when she looked at him in surprise, he was smiling. "Because I am falling in love with you too. Have been since the night I found you running down that road like your life depended on it. You are the bravest, strongest, most fascinating woman I have ever met, Willa Fairchild, and I want to spend every day learning more about you." "You do," Willa whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "I do," Nathan confirmed. He reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and strong around hers. "I know it is fast, and I know you have been through a lot, and I do not want to rush you or pressure you, but I wanted you to know how I feel. I wanted you to know that when Sister Margaret said those things about you being manipulated, she was wrong. What I feel for you is real, and it has nothing to do with taking advantage and everything to do with recognizing someone extraordinary when I see her." Willa felt tears spilling down her cheeks, but they were happy tears, tears of relief and joy and wonder. "I feel the same way," she said. "I never thought I would feel this way about anyone." The sisters taught us that romantic love was a distraction, something that would lead us away from God and into sin. But this does not feel like sin. It feels like the most right thing I have ever experienced. "It is not a sin," Nathan said firmly. "Love is never a sin. It is a gift, maybe the best gift we can give each other." He reached up and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumb, and then, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, he leaned in and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and perfect, and Willa felt something inside her blossom like a flower opening to the sun. This was what she had run toward when she left the convent, even if she had not known it at the time. This feeling of connection, of being seen and valued and loved for exactly who she was. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I have never been kissed before," Willa admitted shyly. "I am honored to be your first," Nathan said. "And if you will let me, I would like to be your last as well. I know it is too soon to talk about marriage, but I want you to know that my intentions are serious, Willa. I am not playing games or looking for a brief romance. When I say I am falling in love with you, I mean that I want to build a life with you, if you will have me." "I will have you," Willa said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, Nathan, yes." They sat on the porch until full dark, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing, and Willa thought that she had never been happier in her entire life. She had run away from a future she did not want, and instead she had run straight into the arms of a man who made her feel like she could do anything, be anything as long as they were together. The months that followed were some of the happiest Willa had ever known. She continued working for Mrs. Dalton, and she was good at it, efficient and organized and reliable. But more than that, she had found a family in the Daltons, people who cared about her and supported her and made her feel like she belonged. And she had found love with Nathan, a love that grew deeper and stronger with each passing day. They courted properly, with Nathan asking his parents' permission, and Willa doing everything by the book. They took walks together on Sunday afternoons, attended church together in town, sat together at family dinners. Nathan was unfailingly respectful, never pushing her beyond what she was comfortable with, always making sure she knew she was valued and loved. By Christmas, when the prairie was covered in snow and the ranch house was warm with firelight and the smell of pine, Nathan proposed officially. He did it on Christmas Eve, in front of the whole family, getting down on one knee in the parlor and presenting her with a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. "Willa Fairchild," he said, his voice strong and sure, "you are the love of my life and my best friend. You are brave and kind and beautiful, and I want to spend the rest of my days making you as happy as you have made me. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Willa said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Nathan, I will marry you." The family erupted in cheers and congratulations, with Mrs. Dalton hugging Willa tightly and telling her she was happy to officially welcome her to the family. James Dalton shook Nathan's hand with gruff pride, and Samuel and Thomas teased their brother mercilessly about being all grown up and getting married. They were wed in the spring of 1885, in a small ceremony at the church in Enid, with the Dalton family and a few close friends in attendance. Willa wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Dalton had helped her sew, and Nathan wore his best suit, and when they stood before the minister and exchanged vows, Willa felt like her heart might burst with joy. "I promise to love you and honor you all the days of my life," Nathan said, his eyes locked on hers. "I promise to support your dreams and stand by your side through whatever comes. I promise to be your partner and your friend, today and always." "I promise to love you with my whole heart," Willa said, her voice steady despite her tears. "I promise to trust you and lean on you and build a life with you. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her with such tenderness and joy that everyone in the church burst into applause. And as they walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, Willa thought about how far she had come from that terrified girl running down a dark road. She had run away from a life that was not her own, and she had run straight into the arms of a man who loved her exactly as she was. They moved into a small house on the ranch property, a two-room cabin that Nathan had built himself with help from his father and brothers. It was simple but comfortable, with a main room that served as kitchen and living space, a bedroom, and a small porch that looked out over the prairie. Willa made curtains for the windows and rugs for the floor, planted a small garden out back, and turned the cabin into a home. Life as a married woman was different from anything Willa had experienced before. She was no longer working for Mrs. Dalton, though she still helped out occasionally when the boarding house was particularly busy. Instead, she focused on keeping her own house, cooking for her husband, tending her garden, and learning the rhythms of ranch life. Nathan taught her to ride, patiently coaching her until she could handle a horse with confidence. And on Sunday afternoons, they would ride out together across the prairie, exploring the land and talking about their dreams for the future. At night, in their small cabin, Nathan taught her about physical love with the same patience and gentleness he showed in everything else. The sisters had taught her nothing about what happened between a husband and wife, and she had been nervous at first, afraid of doing something wrong. But Nathan was tender and careful, always making sure she was comfortable, always putting her needs before his own, and what she had feared would be awkward or frightening turned out to be beautiful and natural and right. "I love you," he would whisper in the darkness, holding her close. "I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone." "I love you too," she would whisper back, marveling at how lucky she was to have found him. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. There were times when money was tight, when the ranch struggled, when they argued about small things that seemed huge in the moment. But they learned to talk through their problems, to listen to each other, to compromise and support each other even when they disagreed. And through it all, their love grew stronger and deeper, rooted in friendship and respect as much as passion. In the spring of 1886, Willa realized she was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening after supper, when they were sitting on their porch watching the sunset, and the look of pure joy on his face made her laugh and cry at the same time. "We are going to have a baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Really?" "Really," Willa confirmed, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "In about 6 months, if my calculations are right." Nathan pulled her into his arms and held her tight, his face buried in her hair. "I am going to be a father," he said, his voice muffled. "We are going to be parents. Willa, this is the best news I have ever heard." "I am glad you are happy," Willa said. "I was a little worried you might think it was too soon." "Too soon?" Nathan pulled back to look at her incredulously. "Willa, I have wanted to start a family with you since the day we met. This is perfect. You are perfect. I cannot wait to meet our baby." The pregnancy was not easy. Willa was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep anything down, and there were times when she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. But Nathan was endlessly patient and supportive, bringing her dry toast and weak tea, holding her hair when she was sick, rubbing her back when she could not get comfortable. And gradually, as the months passed, she began to feel better, and the reality of the baby growing inside her became more real and exciting. Mrs. Dalton was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandmother, and she took Willa under her wing, teaching her everything she knew about babies and childbirth and motherhood. She helped Willa sew tiny clothes and blankets, showed her how to prepare for the birth, and promised to be there when the time came. In November of 1886, on a cold night when the wind was howling across the prairie, Willa went into labor. Nathan rode for his mother and the midwife in town, and then paced the floor of their little cabin like a caged animal while the women tended to his wife. The labor was long and hard, lasting through the night and into the next morning, and there were moments when Willa thought she could not bear it anymore. But Mrs. Dalton held her hand and coached her through each contraction, and the midwife was calm and capable, and finally, just as the sun was rising over the prairie, their baby was born. "It is a boy," the midwife announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A healthy baby boy." Willa collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but elated, and watched as they cleaned and wrapped her son. Nathan was allowed in then, and he came to her side immediately, his eyes red from lack of sleep and worry. "Are you all right?" he asked, taking her hand. "I am fine," Willa said, smiling tiredly. "We have a son, Nathan. A beautiful baby boy." The midwife placed the baby in Willa's arms, and she looked down at the tiny, perfect face, the dark hair, the little fists waving in the air. Love hit her like a physical blow, so intense it made her gasp. This was her child, hers and Nathan's, a life they had created together. "He is perfect," Nathan breathed, running one finger gently over the baby's soft cheek. "He is absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Willa knew exactly what his name should be. "James," she said, "after your father, James Nathan Dalton." Nathan's eyes filled with tears. "My father will be honored, and so am I. James Nathan Dalton, our son." He leaned down and kissed Willa's forehead. "Thank you, my love. Thank you for this incredible gift." The early months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. James was a colicky baby who did not sleep well, and there were many nights when Willa and Nathan took turns walking the floor with him, trying to soothe his cries. But there were also moments of pure magic, when the baby would look up at them with wide, wondering eyes, or curl his tiny fingers around theirs, or fall asleep on Nathan's chest with a contented sigh. Watching Nathan with their son made Willa fall even more deeply in love with him. He was a natural father, patient and gentle and utterly devoted. He would talk to James as if the baby could understand every word, telling him about the ranch and the horses and all the things they would do together when he was older. And at night, when the baby finally slept, Nathan would hold Willa close and tell her how much he loved her, how grateful he was for the family they had built together. As James grew from a baby into a toddler, Willa and Nathan settled into a comfortable rhythm. Their little cabin became too small, and with his father's help, Nathan built an addition, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. They talked about having more children, and Willa became pregnant again when James was 2 years old. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and in the spring of 1889 they welcomed a daughter into the world. They named her Caroline after Willa's mother, and she was everything her brother was not, a calm, easy baby who slept through the night almost from the start and smiled at everyone she met. "We are blessed," Nathan said one evening, watching Willa nurse Caroline while James played with wooden blocks on the floor. "So incredibly blessed." "We are," Willa agreed. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life, that I get to have all of this. A husband who loves me, beautiful healthy children, a home of my own. When I was at the convent, I never imagined I could be this happy." "I am glad you ran," Nathan said softly. "I know it was hard, and I know you were scared, but I am so glad you had the courage to run toward the life you wanted. Because it gave me the chance to love you, and that has been the greatest privilege of my life." "And you told me to run toward you instead," Willa said, smiling at the memory. "Best advice anyone ever gave me." Over the years, their family continued to grow. A third child, a son they named William, arrived in 1891, followed by another daughter, Ruth, in 1893. Their little cabin expanded into a proper house, with enough bedrooms for all the children and a large kitchen where Willa could cook for her growing family. Nathan took over more and more of the ranch operations as his father aged, and he was a fair and capable manager, respected by the hands and loved by his family. Willa became involved in the Enid community, helping to establish a school where her children and others could receive a proper education. She taught reading and writing to anyone who wanted to learn, and she never forgot what it was like to have her choices taken away. She made sure that her daughters knew they could be anything they wanted to be, that they did not have to choose between marriage and independence, and she raised her sons to respect women and value their contributions. Sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet and the children were asleep, Willa would lie in Nathan's arms and think about the girl she had been, running down that dark road with no plan and no future. She had been so scared, so certain she was making a mistake, so unsure of what came next. But she had also been brave, and she had chosen to run toward something better, even if she did not know what that something was. And then Nathan had appeared, like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to pray. He had offered her help without demands, friendship without conditions, love without reservations. He had seen her, really seen her in a way no one else ever had, and he had chosen her just as surely as she had chosen him. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan murmured, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her back. "About how much I love you," Willa said. "About how grateful I am for the life we have built together. About how running away from the convent was the best decision I ever made." "Second best," Nathan corrected gently. "The best decision was running toward me." Willa laughed and snuggled closer to him. "You are right. That was the best decision, and I would make it again in a heartbeat." The years passed, as years do, bringing both joy and sorrow. James Dalton Sr. passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1895, and the whole family mourned the loss of the man who had been the foundation of the ranch and the family. Nathan officially took over as ranch manager, and he ran it with the same steady competence his father had shown. Mrs. Dalton remained active and healthy well into her 70s, delighting in her many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She and Willa became not just mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, but true friends and Mrs. Dalton often told anyone who would listen that Willa was the best thing that had ever happened to her son. Samuel and Thomas both married and started their own families, building homes on the ranch property and working alongside Nathan. The Dalton Ranch prospered and grew, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. And when Oklahoma achieved statehood in 1907, Nathan was invited to the ceremonies as a respected member of the community. Through it all, Willa and Nathan's love remained constant. They had their disagreements and their struggles, as all couples do, but they faced them together, always choosing each other, always working to understand and support each other. They grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces gaining lines, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and long years. But when Nathan looked at Willa, he still saw the brave young woman who had run down that road toward her own future. And when Willa looked at Nathan, she still saw the kind cowboy who had offered her help and ended up giving her everything. Their children grew up and had children of their own, and the house that had once seemed too large was often filled with the noise and chaos of family gatherings. James became a teacher, following in his mother's footsteps, while Caroline married a lawyer from Enid and became active in the suffrage movement. William took over much of the ranch operations, and Ruth became a nurse, tending to the sick and injured throughout the territory. Willa was proud of all of them, proud of the lives they had built and the people they had become. She had given them the gift her parents had given her, and that she herself had fought so hard for, the freedom to choose their own paths. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1915, Nathan and Willa sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the prairie just as they had done so many times before. Their children and grandchildren had thrown them a party earlier that day, and the house was still filled with the remnants of celebration, but now it was just the two of them, enjoying the quiet and each other's company. 30 years, Nathan said wonderingly. It does not seem possible that it has been that long. In some ways it feels like a lifetime, Willa said, and in others it feels like just yesterday that I was running down that road, scared out of my mind. Best night of my life, Nathan said, finding you there, getting to bring you home. I knew right then that you were special, that you were going to change my life. You changed mine, Willa said. You gave me everything I ever wanted and so much more. A home, a family, love. You taught me that I was worth loving, that my dreams mattered, that I deserved to be happy. You always deserved those things, Nathan said. I just got lucky enough to be the one to show you. He took her hand, his fingers still strong despite his age, and brought it to his lips. I love you, Willa Dalton. I have loved you for 30 years, and I will love you for 30 more if God gives us that long. I love you too, Willa said, tears in her eyes. You are my home, Nathan. You have been since the moment you smiled at me and told me to run toward you instead. Best advice I ever took. They sat together as the stars came out, holding hands and remembering all the years behind them, grateful for the present, and looking forward to whatever time they had left together. And Willa thought, not for the first time, that running away from the convent had been the bravest and best thing she had ever done. Because it had led her here, to this man, to this life, to this love that had sustained and nourished her for 3 decades, and would continue to do so for whatever time remained. She had run away from a future that was not her own, and she had run straight into the arms of her destiny. And she had never looked back. The years continued to unfold with the gentle persistence of seasons changing. By 1920, Nathan and Willa were in their 50s, still active and engaged with the ranch and their growing family. The world around them had changed dramatically. The Great War had come and gone, taking with it some of the young men from the community, though their own sons had been spared. Automobiles were becoming more common, even in rural Oklahoma, and the old ways of ranch life were slowly giving way to modern conveniences. But some things remained constant. Nathan still rode out with the hands most days, though he moved a bit slower than he once had. Willa still tended her garden, still taught reading to children in the community, still welcomed her ever-expanding family into her home for Sunday dinners. And they still sat together on their porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing, holding hands like young lovers. You remember what Sister Margaret said? Willa asked one evening, apropos of nothing. When she came to take me back. I remember, Nathan said. She said a lot of things, most of them wrong. She said I would fall into sin and ruin, Willa said thoughtfully, that I would regret my choice for the rest of my life. I wonder what she would think if she could see me now. I think she would have to admit she was wrong, Nathan said. Though I suspect she would find some way to disapprove anyway. Some people are just determined to see the worst in things. Maybe, Willa said. Or maybe she would be happy for me. She said the convent would always be there if I needed help, and that seemed genuine. Maybe under all that severity, she actually cared about me in her own way. Maybe she did, Nathan agreed. But caring about someone means wanting them to be happy, not trying to force them into a life they do not want. You made the right choice, Willa. Our life together is proof of that. I know, Willa said. I have never doubted it, not for a single day. Even in the hard times, even when things were difficult, I never wished I had stayed. How could I, when staying would have meant missing out on all of this? On you, on our children, on this life we have built together. Nathan pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. I am a lucky man, Willa Dalton, the luckiest man who ever lived. We are both lucky, Willa corrected. Lucky to have found each other, lucky to have had all these years together. Mrs. Dalton passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1922, at the age of 86. The whole family gathered for the funeral, and Willa spoke about the woman who had taken her in when she had nowhere else to go, who had given her work and respect, and eventually treated her like a daughter. She talked about Mrs. Dalton's strength and fairness, her practical wisdom, her fierce love for her family. And she thanked her, one last time, for believing in a scared young woman who had run away from the convent and needed a second chance. After the funeral, Nathan found Willa in the cemetery, standing by the fresh grave. She was a remarkable woman, Willa said quietly. I would not have any of this without her. She could have turned me away, could have refused to hire someone with no references and a scandalous past. But she saw something in me worth taking a chance on. She saw what I saw, Nathan said. Someone brave and honest and hardworking, someone worth believing in. I miss her already, Willa said, tears streaming down her face. She was more of a mother to me than anyone since my own mother died. I know, Nathan said, holding her close. I miss her too, but she lived a good, long life, and she was surrounded by people who loved her until the very end. We should all be so lucky. They stood together for a long time, saying their goodbyes, and then walked back to the house hand in hand, ready to continue living the life that Mrs. Dalton had helped make possible. As the 1920s progressed, Willa and Nathan settled into the comfortable rhythms of middle age. Their children were all grown and established in their own lives. Their grandchildren were growing up, and the ranch continued to prosper under William's capable management. Nathan gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations, though he still loved to ride out and check on the herds, still loved working with the horses. Willa published a memoir in 1925, telling the story of her escape from the convent and her life on the frontier. She wrote honestly about her fears and struggles, about the kindness of the Dalton family, about falling in love with Nathan and building a life together. The book was well received, and she received letters from women all over the country who told her that her story had inspired them to pursue their own dreams, to make their own choices, to refuse to let others define their futures. I never imagined I would write a book, Willa told Nathan, holding one of the many letters she had received. But I am glad I did. If my story can help even one woman find the courage to choose her own path, then it was worth it. Your story is remarkable, Nathan said. You are remarkable. Always have been. In 1935, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. The whole family gathered for a massive party, with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren filling the house and spilling out onto the lawn. There was music and dancing and more food than anyone could possibly eat, and in the middle of it all, Willa and Nathan stood together, older and grayer but still clearly in love. James, their eldest son, gave a toast. To my parents, he said, raising his glass, who taught us by example what real love looks like, who showed us that courage means choosing your own path, even when it is scary, who built a life together based on respect and partnership and genuine affection. We are all better people because of you, and we love you more than words can say. Everyone cheered and clinked glasses, and Willa felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears. She looked around at all these people, all these lives that existed because she had been brave enough to run away from the convent 50 years ago, because Nathan had been kind enough to stop and offer help, because they had chosen each other and built something beautiful together. "Thank you," she whispered to Nathan, "for everything, for all of this." "Thank you," he whispered back, "for running toward me, for saying yes, for 50 years of being my partner and my love." They danced together that evening, slowly circling the floor to a sweet, old-fashioned waltz, and Willa rested her head on Nathan's chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart. This was what she had run toward all those years ago, even if she had not known it at the time. This moment, this man, this love that had sustained her through half a century of joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges. The world continued to change around them. The Great Depression brought hard times to many, though the ranch weathered it better than most. World War II came and took some of their grandsons to fight overseas, and Willa prayed every day for their safe return. They all came home, thank God, and she wept with relief when the last one walked through the door. Nathan's health began to fail in the late 1940s. He had always been strong and vigorous, but age and hard work had taken their toll. He developed heart problems, and the doctor warned that he needed to slow down, to take it easy. Nathan tried, but it was hard for a man who had spent his whole life active and engaged to suddenly become sedentary. Willa took care of him with the same devotion he had always shown her. She made sure he took his medicine, encouraged him to rest, kept him company during the long days when he could not go out and work. And they talked endlessly about their life together, their children and grandchildren, the memories they had made. "I have no regrets," Nathan told her one day as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. "Not a single one. Every choice I made led me to you, and that makes it all worthwhile." "I have no regrets either," Willa said, holding his hand tightly. "Except that I wish we had more time. I wish we could have another 50 years together." "Me too," Nathan said softly, "but we have had a good run, Willa. Better than most people ever get. We loved each other well, raised good children, built a life worth living. That is all anyone can ask for." "It is not enough," Willa said fiercely. "I want more. I want forever." "You will have forever," Nathan said, bringing her hand to his lips. "Because I will love you beyond death, and we will find each other again in whatever comes next. This is not the end, my love. It is just a pause." Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1951, at the age of 82. Willa was lying beside him when it happened, holding his hand, and his last words were, "I love you." She whispered it back, even though she knew he was already gone, and then she lay there for a long time, unwilling to let go, unwilling to accept that their time together had finally run out. The funeral was the largest the community had ever seen. Nathan had been respected and loved, and people came from all over to pay their respects. Willa stood by his grave and listened to the eulogies, heard people talk about what a good man he had been, how he had helped them and treated them fairly, how he had been a pillar of the community. And all of it was true, but it did not capture the essence of who he really was. He was the young cowboy who had stopped to help a scared girl running down a road in the dark. He was the man who had told her to run toward him instead, and then had spent the rest of his life proving that she had made the right choice. He was her partner, her lover, her best friend, the father of her children, the love of her life. And now he was gone, and she did not know how she was supposed to go on without him. But she did, because that was what he would have wanted. She continued to live in their house, surrounded by family, visited constantly by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who all wanted to hear stories about Grandma and Grandpa, about the old days, about how they had fallen in love. She told them everything, held nothing back, wanting them to understand what real love looked like, what it meant to choose someone and keep choosing them every day for a lifetime. She published another book in 1953, this time about her marriage to Nathan, about the life they had built together. She dedicated it to him, and on the dedication page she wrote simply, "For Nathan, who taught me what love means, I am still running toward you." Willa lived to be 91 years old, remaining sharp and engaged until the very end. She passed away peacefully in 1960, surrounded by family, and her last words were the same as Nathan's had been. "I love you." She was buried beside him, their graves marked with simple headstones that bore their names and dates in a single line. Together forever, as it was always meant to be. Their descendants continued to thrive, carrying forward the legacy of courage and love that Willa and Nathan had established. The ranch remained in the family for generations, and the story of how Willa had run away from the convent and found love with a cowboy became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. And sometimes, on warm summer evenings, when the sun was setting over the Oklahoma prairie in shades of gold and pink, people swore they could see two figures sitting on the porch of the old Dalton house, holding hands and watching the light fade, still together after all these years, still choosing each other, still running toward the love that had defined their lives and would continue to define them for all eternity. Because some love stories do not end with death. Some love stories are too strong, too true, too fundamental to be broken by something as small as mortality. And the love between Willa Fairchild and Nathan Dalton was exactly that kind of love, eternal, unshakable, and absolutely real. It had started with a desperate run toward freedom and a kind offer of help. It had been nurtured through years of partnership and mutual respect. It had deepened through the raising of children, the building of a life, the facing of challenges together. And it had endured beyond death, becoming a legacy that would inspire generations to come. When people asked what made their marriage so successful, what secret they had that allowed them to stay in love for over 50 years, the answer was simple. They chose each other, every single day, even when it was hard, even when they disagreed, even when life threw obstacles in their path. They chose love over fear, partnership over independence, together over apart. And it had all started on a dark September night in 1884, when a frightened young woman ran away from the convent, and a kind cowboy told her to run toward him instead. Everything else, all the joy and love and life that followed, grew from that single moment of courage and kindness, that first choice to trust, to hope, to believe that something better was possible. Willa had run away from a life she did not want, and she had run straight into the arms of her destiny. And in doing so, she had not just saved herself. She had found her home, her partner, her great love. She had found everything she never knew she needed, everything she never dared to hope for. She had found Nathan, and that had made all the difference.